There was complete silence in the office until it was broken by the loud, rude voice of the doctor, who told the girl that the diagnosis was wrong. Dr. Zakaskov stunned the girl when, after adjusting her glasses, he said that she could again live as before, and the days of her life were no longer limited. The girl in the chair opposite was called Lariette Blanche, and she was sure she had no more than 3 months to live. She looked at the doctor in shock. When Dr. Zakaskov asked her if she was happy, Lariette laughed with tears on her cheeks. She told the doctor that she was sure that she did not have long left, and did what she wanted. Lariette had a picture in her head of how the first sword of the Empire and the ghost of war held her hair, inhaled her scent, and said that he would find her no matter where she ran. His name was Duke Candle, and now cold sweat covered her face when she realized that her life would go on, and she would again need to think about where to hide. She jumped out of her chair, thinking about death, when suddenly Dr. Zakaskov asked if she was glad that her diagnosis turned out to be wrong. She wasn't happy about it at all. So what happened 3 months ago? Lariette then felt strange and, secretly from everyone, made an appointment with Dr. Zakaskov and underwent a medical examination. A young girl complained to the doctor that she could not sleep normally and felt terrible pain in her stomach after eating spicy food. And what was strange and unbearable was that Lariette's heart was constantly beating strongly. Dr. Zakaskov noted that all symptoms point to Locadura disease, which is an incurable disease in which a person is born with an excessive amount of mana. Lariette's eyes widened when the doctor added that, unfortunately, 98% of people die from Locadura disease. She was scared, so Lady Blanche learned that she had 3 months to live. That's how her life changed when she heard her life sentence. The girl was shocked by what the doctor told her. I thought about how she should live further. Wrapped in a warm coat, she walked home, not seeing the road. As soon as she entered her luxurious house, she was picked up by the maid. It was her assistant. She was about the same age as her mistress. The maid sat Lariette down on a chair and began combing her beautiful long hair. The girl sat quietly, her eyes tightly closed. Although Lariette was worried, she couldn't just lie down and wait in the wings. So she decided to make a list of everything she wanted to do before she died and completely follow through on it. When this list of dying wishes appeared in the girl's head, it was as if she became a curious child again. A little girl woke up in her, who, no matter what, wanted to fulfill this list. Lariette's family was not poor, which is why the girl had a personal assistant, Anne. Suddenly, Lariette stunned Anne with a question about what she would like to do before she died. To which Anne replied that she could not die and leave her mistress Lariette alone in this world, continuing to comb her hair with an expensive golden comb. The maid's words made Lariette feel moved, and Anne added that her mistress couldn't even comb her hair beautifully. These words upset the girl a little, but then her assistant still replied that she would buy a lot of cakes and try a piece of each. Lariette was amused by Anne's response and mentioned how she had recently licked a piece of candy and immediately thrown it away. The maid reminded them that it was time for them to go to lunch. Although Lariette really didn't want to leave her room, she still listened to Anne and went into the dining room upset. The young lady was already walking along the chic corridor to the hall, when suddenly, Lariette was overtaken by memories that her relationship with her family left much to be desired. When she entered the dining room, the tables there were laden with expensive delicacies. Her parents were sitting at the long dining table. Her father, the 5th Duke of Blanche, a high-ranking official who failed in business but retained his status due to his family's involvement in the founding of the country, wants to marry her off to a wealthy old marquis, and her mother, Duchess Blanche, who married only because of the status of the family, was at one with her father, was a confident lady with perfect posture and her head held high. In the luxurious dining room, Lariette Blanche felt like a stupid girl who knows it all but pretends not to understand anything. Suddenly, Lariette's older brother Rayon entered the hall. Duchess Blanche was indignant that he was late for the family dinner. The Duke was equally outraged. It was Rayon Blanche, Lariette's older brother, the favorite of their family. He was allowed to do everything, and he wasn't too worried about being late. And Rayon was a favorite because as soon as he attended lessons for receivers and magic classes because of his status as an heir. We should not forget that he received the entire fortune of their parents. And Lariette herself, as the second daughter, received neither fortune nor education. The girl studied only office work to be an assistant for Rayon. And what impudence Rayon had when he looked at his sister and asked what she was doing here. Would a loving brother really allow himself to be treated like this? To which Lariette indignantly replied that she was also a member of their family. She was unbearably tired and offended that she was not loved in her own family. Imagine Rayan's surprise when Lariette told him to listen more carefully to the heir's lessons. Otherwise, it would be a pity to look at the teacher, Duke Joel. How much resentment lurked in Lariette's head. Only thoughts flashed that she would have done better than Rayon in these classes. Suddenly, Rayon decided to take revenge on his sister, raised his glass over her head and knocked it over. It was rose wine and it flowed straight onto her head. Lariette's thoughts were interrupted by a stream of pink liquid through her hair, face and dress. She sat drenched in wine and didn't understand why her family didn't love her so much. Pouring the last drops of wine from the glass onto his sister's head, he added that he had lost his appetite for her. Oh, what a scoundrel. He also had the audacity to add that he would not eat until Lariette left the dining room. And all this happened specifically in front of their parents. And here Duchess Blanche took her son's side and shouted to her daughter that she was getting on her brother's nerves. Is this what a loving mother would do? Lariette completely lost her speech when her mother sent her to her room to wash. Okay, brother, but Mom, the closest person to every child, could protect her. Pink drops of wine flowed down the poor man's cheeks. And she jumped up from the chair with such resentment, rose from the dining table and leaned over the table, resting her hands on it. Heading out of the hall, the girl stopped right at the door, turned to her family and said that she would die in 3 months. When she had already left that room that she hated, she had in her mind that they wouldn't care about it anyway. Lariette decided that she did not want to live and die like a fool, and therefore she would live the remaining time as she wanted. So, already in her room, Lariette took a pen, her diary, and began her list of things that I want to accomplish before I die. It was now the 3rd of April, 732 according to the imperial calendar. She had 3 months. The first is to give Anne a cake. The second is to achieve independence from parents and save money. The third is to break off the engagement with the Marquis of Segrève, expressing courtesy. Fourth, meet a handsome young man just for these 3 months. Fifth, make the journey to the west that Roan spoke so much about. There was still nothing in Lariette's life that she was afraid of losing. All these years her family used her all the time. This constantly bothered her. But now she clearly decided for herself that now she must make her life her own. Yes, she really wanted this. In a luxurious carriage on the way home, Lariette and Anne happily discussed that they had completed the first item on the list together. Anne was taken back to her childhood by trying these different cakes. Suddenly, their fun was interrupted by the eerie rumble of a carriage beneath them. They swayed from side to side. The coachman reported that their carriage fell into a hole, adding that he would immediately figure out how to get them out of the hole. When Lariette heard the coachman's words that another carriage was coming this way, she was scared like a little girl. The thought flashed through my head that I needed to use my magical abilities and get out faster. The coachman realized that Duke Candel's carriage had arrived. He added that they should not leave their carriage and sit quietly. And the maid noticed that you need to take care of your reputation. Lariette recognized the coat of arms of the Candel family on someone else's carriage. This is an ancient family with the most powerful influence in the empire. Their duke is called a monster. Realizing this sent shivers down her body. As soon as the girl realized this, she saw a man in the carriage window. He was very close. His blue eyes looked straight at her, and there was a mask on his face. She was frightened by surprise. Suddenly, this man picked up and lifted their carriage off the ground. He put the carriage on the ground already on a flat surface. Lariette thought that even the coachman of this family was not at all simple. Finally, their carriage reached the castle and they reached their home. Lariette walked to the gate and thought that the Marquis of Segrève was probably resting at home. It's so good that she doesn't see his unpleasant face. As soon as she thought about it, she saw him. The Marquis said that he was very glad to see Lariette and kissed her hand. She never thought that he would come to her home. The Marquis pressed her to him and tried to kiss her on the cheek, asking where she had been. He said that they would soon get married, and then she would not break away from him. Then Lariette remembered the third item on her list. This Marquis was so unpleasant to her, especially his arrogant behavior towards her. She decided to take action. Today. The third point sounded like she needed to break off her engagement with the Marquis of Segrève, expressing courtesy. But she crossed out the last 2 words in her head. Lariette stood opposite the Marquis and directed all her magical powers at him. She decided that this was the perfect day to get rid of him once and for all. With a wave of her hand, the girl threw away her unsuccessful groom with a stream of magic, and he ended up on a tree on the branches. She thought this was a great chance to accomplish the third item on her list. The Blanche family has always been famous for its outstanding magicians. Although Lariette was born with a huge magical gift, she did not receive a proper education, and her brother was always jealous of her talent. All this time the girl studied, watching her brother study. The teacher saw her sister's talent and sometimes taught her magic. And so, the result is that the Marquis hung upside down on a tree. Lariette approached the Marquis, who was hanging upside down, and the tree had already covered his mouth. The girl said that she had absolutely no intention of marrying him. That's why they break off their engagement today. The girl told the groom everything she thought about him with such caustic words that she was disgusted by the scum who measured the value of people with money. She was finally able to say it. Oh my God. For some reason Marquis Segreve is silent, and he doesn't respond to her barbs at all. His face turned red. Now, Lady Blanche and Duke Blanche are already running towards them with a frightened look. It looks like something didn't go according to plan. She overdid it. Roan Blanche ran up, directed his magic at the hanging Marquis of Segreve. The tree weakened its branches, and he fell to the ground with a roar. Sitting on the ground, he only whispered that he would never forget such a shame. The Duke and Duchess Blanche rushed to the Marquis of Segreve, lifted him up, and began to apologize for their disobedient daughter. To which they received the answer that they should forget about the deal. The Marquis was indignant, and the Duchess sobbed, and even the Duke shed a tear. Lariette stood in shock at her family, who always valued money more than their daughter. She also couldn't stand the Marquis, who bought people for money. How tired she is of all this. It's time to end this. Her thoughts were interrupted by her mother's scream. How could she create such a performance, almost killing the Marquis of Segreve? To which the girl replied that she should have done this much earlier, and that she almost went crazy in this family. Suddenly, her words were interrupted by a blow to the face from her father. She howled in pain. The father shouted whether she understood what she had done to the Marquis. The Duke asked if Lariette wanted their duchy to drown in debt, to which Lariette replied that it was not she who incurred all these debts, and that it was not her who had to pay them off. Finally told Mom and Dad what I thought. All this time they enjoyed wealth and luxury, and she only received beatings. And my mother replied that she owed them for clothes, food, and a bed. She inherited all the privileges, and she must be responsible for it. The girl replied that she was already involved in the affairs of the duchy. My father said that I had to continue doing business, not do anything stupid, and know my place. The Duke threatened to erase his daughter from the family tree. The Duchess wanted to calm her worried husband, but Lariette interrupted them. The girl reminded that this is just a piece of paper that can burn. She hoped that they had not erased her from their hearts, but it turned out that she was not there. So she said goodbye and bowed to her parents one last time. The girl thanked her parents for everything and walked towards the gate. What she heard amazed her. Her father shouted that she should not take anything with her from the duchy. She was upset. Suddenly her brother called out to her. I wanted to know how she could humiliate him at a family dinner and destroy the family atmosphere with her misdeed with the Marquis. But more than that, the girl was hurt when he said that she knew neither earth magic nor the elements of magic, said she was too arrogant, and they fought in a magical battle. Lariette won, and Rayon buried himself in the asphalt. Then the sister came up and said that she was stronger than her brother in magic, and Rayon only called for help from Lariette, who was leaving into the distance. Ultimately, Lariette actually left home. Anne's assistant cried and hugged Lariette, asking her to stay, but the girl was adamant. Lariette was already walking around the village when she remembered that she had already managed to complete 3 items on her list. There are only 2 things left: meet the young man and go on a trip to the west. The girl wanted her man to be handsome and with rich love experience, so that it would be easier for them to date during these 3 months. And she imagined the man's appearance from what she studied in books. It's good that Lariette took at least some money with her, but she still needed to earn more money somewhere in order to live well and enjoy life. Lariette decided to do what she does best. It was the magic of purification. She opened the doors to the house where the purification magician lived and walked inside inspired. Purification magic is less effective than healing magic, and also requires a huge amount of mana. It cannot be used on people stronger than you in witchcraft and on yourself. The same applies to sacred powers. But Lariette thought that she didn't care, because she had a lot of mana. She walked over to the table where Mac was sitting and addressed him. Imagine the girl's surprise when he refused to give her a job. The purification mage said that they are not looking for purification mages and they have enough healing mages, adding that she should leave and not interfere with his work. She had so much hope for this job. This was shocking news for Lariette. With tears in her eyes, she moved on, looking for another job. She walked upset and didn't notice how the bag on her shoulder slipped a little. Suddenly, someone pulled her bag and she saw your guys running away with her bag, which contained all her living money. The girl shouted to them to stand, but heard only laughter in response. Then Lariette got even more angry and decided to use magic. This shocked the guys, but they didn't stop. And then Lariette realized that she would not catch up with them and called for help. Then he appeared, handsome as if created by God. The guys saw him and stopped. They froze in place. They smelled a very unpleasant smell, similar to the smell of a rotten corpse. And then the thieves realized who was in front of them. They recognized him. It was the same Duke monster Candle. When they said this, the Duke took out his knife and dealt with them. The thieves fell to the ground and the Duke picked up the bag from the ground. Lariette looked at him without taking her eyes off. She realized that then it was not the coachman, but Duke Candle himself. He walked up to her and handed her a bag with all her money. He was a member of the most powerful family in the Karshan Empire, Aslakan Kandel. He was a general in a victorious war doomed to lose, and he was called the first sword of the empire and the sign of war. This is what Lariette knew about him, but she would also add that he was simply deadly handsome. The smell was a little off-putting, but his face was shining and attracted her so much. The girl thought that with such a handsome face he must have had many girlfriends, and also that he would not just catch up with these bandits, since he is known for his coldness. Aslakan, looking at Lariette, thought that she looked like a noblewoman who walked around without protection. What he was looking for was nowhere to be found. Then he decided that I would not touch or scare her until the curse subsided. The man turned around and became sad because of the curse, and the girl grabbed his shoulder. She asked if he had a girlfriend and offered to date him for just 3 months. This was the 4th item on her list. They felt embarrassed. The girl started the acquaintance by saying that she was Lariette and wanted to add her last name, but didn't. Then she asked the man his name, but added that she knew it was him. He replied. Lariette looked at him with loving eyes. She said that he has a very pleasant voice, to which Aslakan thought that she was joking and this was some kind of joke. For the first time in 20 years, someone called him by name. Lariette again repeated her question whether he would date her for 3 months. Candle asked if she was afraid of him, because she saw how he cut up the 2 guys who stole her bag. The man told her to finish her jokes and turn to leave, but suddenly I heard her sobbing and thought that she was laughing. He left, thinking that she was not serious. Lariette was head over heels in love. She thought Candle was charismatic and sexy. How can all these qualities be combined in him? She decided that the only thing he was missing was her. The girl was walking around the city and decided to go to a bar. She took a mug of beer and thought about how they could meet again. Suddenly, she heard someone discussing the latest events related to Candel. Lariette decided to sit down at the table where the Information Guild was. There she learned about the curse and about the smell of death, that is, the smell of rotten corpses, which did not bother her as much as they did. The guys said that the Duke was looking for a purification mage in the Information Guild who would lift the curse. But it is so strong that everyone just runs away. Purification magic requires more mana than extraction magic, and it was created for liberation from curses. But there are many more people dying from the sword, so there are few specialists. Lariette realized that only she could help him, and besides, she really wanted to see him. As they say, if you want to catch a tiger, climb into its den. The girl decided to find his house. A week has passed. Lariette is on the threshold of the house. Doorbell. She came to him and told him her plan. After listening, the Duke understands whether she understands all the responsibility for the purification process. The girl replied that although she had studied magic properly, she was good at cleansing magic. Thinking that she would soon die anyway, Lariette grabbed Aslakan's hand. Candle shuddered in surprise. The magic of cleansing began. Lariette realized that a very large amount of mana would be required. The curse was too strong. Due to the collision of forces, energies become uncontrollable. After a moment, Lariette reported that her physical strength had depleted, and her mana had run out, and asked the Duke to check her hand. Asli was sure that nothing would work out. While the Duke was unwinding his hand, he said that he had had this curse since childhood, and when he unwound his hand, she would see flayed flesh and the stench of rotting corpses would fill the entire room. Imagine his surprise when he saw an absolutely normal, beautiful hand. He couldn't believe his eyes. He admired his hands. Lariat stood pleased. Lariat invited Asli to draw up a contract, and he agreed because he didn't want to let her go until the curse completely disappeared. He considered her his miracle. The contract stated that Asli would provide her with housing and food for a period of 3 months as payment for the purification ceremony. He held her close to him and promised to fulfill this agreement. Lariat opened her eyes with difficulty. She didn't understand where she was. The girl was in a luxurious bed. Asli Kandel was sitting opposite. She asked him where she was. The Duke replied that they were in the Duchy of Kandel, as stated in the contract, the clause on the provision of housing and food. Lariat thanked Asli for bringing her here. Kandel reminded Lariat about the contract. He said he was keeping 1 copy for himself. The girl was very happy about this. This meant that he signed the contract and agreed to all the conditions. Asli told her that he signed because she is the only one who can lift the curse. Lariat wanted a tight hug with him, but since this did not work out, she took his hands in hers. Lariat asked Asli to take care of her from now on, and she, in turn, will take care of him. To which he replied that he and she were just an employer and an employee. The Duke had a thought in his head all the time, why she was not afraid of him and did not even avoid him who she was. Lariat asked to call her Rieu, and she asked not to call her by name but only by name. Asli replied that he came to her only because she lost consciousness, to check that everything was okay with her. He also brought Lariat's things, and now it was time for him to leave. Lariat was upset. It seemed strange to her that he didn't like her. She thought he had a lot of love experience, but he was so unapproachable. Maybe she's not his type? But tastes change, she thought. She wanted to get up to be closer, but he told her to lie down and gain strength. And again Asli seemed incredibly cute to Lariat. As he was leaving, the Duke said that they would see each other tomorrow and talk. Lariat hugged her pillow and for a long time remembered his perfectly handsome face, which she saw immediately after waking up. Kandel heard, standing outside the door, how the girl admired his beauty. He blushed and smiled. The Duke thought she was really strange. Asli sat in his chair and drank tea, reading papers. Lariat sat opposite him and looked straight at him. When he noticed her, he asked if she wanted to ask something. Lariat replied that she was waiting for the moment when he would stop pretending not to notice her. She asked why he didn't have breakfast with her. She was waiting for him and thought that he would come. The Duke was surprised that the girl wanted to have breakfast with him. He said that he would spoil her appetite. This surprised her and he asked how much she knew about his curse, to which Lariat replied that she did not know anything. Then Asli said that when he was 7 years old, the caster sent a curse on him at the moment of death, which is why it is so strong and cannot be removed by killing the caster. Because of this curse, the skin throughout the body withers and rots, and the bandages have a spell that blocks odors. Purification magicians were only able to slow down the process. Since only Lariat could help Asli, he decided that if she wanted to run away from him out of disgust, he could imprison her next to him. He was ready to do anything to get rid of the curse. The girl grabbed his sore hand and asked if she had hurt him. She sympathized with him that he lived with such torment, reproaching herself for wanting to use him for her own purposes. Lariat promised Asli that she would lift the curse from him. Duke Kandel did not understand why she was not afraid of him. After all, everyone shies away from it, and no one can stand the terrible stench. Everyone begins to feel sick. But she was not like that. Lariat treated him like a person and looks at him as if she sees something pleasant, and she even turns his selfish greed into nothing. When Lariat began healing his hand, Asli saw that she was getting worse and asked her to leave the magic so that it would not weaken. He grabbed her hand and noted that she had very thin wrists. Asli said that she did not need to overexert herself. I wanted to remove my hand and cover it with bandages. She replied that she had little mana right now. She just wanted to check something. The left hand turned out to be practically healthy on the outside, but the cleansing magic still works. Lariat found out that until the arm is completely healthy, It is impossible to move on to other parts of the body. Aslan replied that he was satisfied if the cleansing took place gradually. Lariat assured him that she would keep her promise and said that she would cure him before he died. Oh, Lariat spilled the beans. Aslan asked her what until death means. She corrected herself that she would do it as quickly as possible. She assured him that he would make a full recovery. The Duke decided to ask the question that worried him so much. Isn't she afraid of him? To which Lariat replied that she had no reason for this. That's why she's with him. Lariat added that the rumors about the ghost of war, on the contrary, make her proud of him. After all, he won an obviously losing war. It is all envious tongues that are afraid of his glory and recognition. And about the curse she added that you need to fear the caster, and not the one on whom it was placed. It is stupid to blame the victim. The perpetrator must be punished. Lariat gently cupped the guy's face with her hands. The girl said that she was not afraid of him at all. She was only afraid that he would refuse to meet with her. She looked tenderly into his eyes. She liked his soft cheeks. The Duke felt awkward and asked Lariat to let him go. Going to the window, he said that at 7 o'clock they would meet for dinner. Lariat was pleased. She smiled sweetly and said goodbye to Aslan. Lariat walked along the corridor and thought how sensitive Aslan is to touch. She just touched his cheeks and he already agreed to dinner. Suddenly, a male voice called out to her. It was the butler. The loyal butler of the Candle Duchy. Hallstein asked if she had met the Duke. She thanked him for finding the office at his prompting and said that she had been invited to dinner today. Butler Hallstein thought, it was interesting that the Duke invited someone to have dinner together. After all, after the death of the previous Duchess, he no longer shared a meal with anyone. The butler asked Lariat to take care of Aslan, to which she replied that they were just having dinner. But he didn't think so. So he went to the Duke's office, taking the book with him. A heavy large book appeared on the Duke's table. It was brought by the butler Hallstein. It was Instructions for a Great Date. Aslan was indignant that he did not need this. And he thought to himself that he had been well taught table etiquette as a child, but that was so long ago. So he was worried that there might be new rules, but they weren't. He was so afraid that this sorceress, who was 5 years younger than him, would laugh at him for not knowing manners. But the book had date written on it. It definitely had nothing to do with him. The butler insisted that in his 27 years of service, this book had not been as useful as it was now. Hallstein began to read out the basic rules of etiquette on a date with a girl. Aslan pretended that he did not listen to the fact that he needed to move the chair away for the lady and look tenderly into her eyes during the meal. The guy put on a coat, explaining that he needed to hide the smell of the curse. Lariat was already waiting in the dining room. She was happy to see him as always. Aslan sat down opposite. He didn't think that she would be so happy about this ordinary dinner, and that she would be so glad to see him. The girl sat down next to me and said that she wanted to adjust the contract a little. The Duke agreed. I thought that Lariat wanted more money and that he even agreed to pay her. But Lariat felt that she was not asking enough for cleansing, and added such items as a joint lunch, once a day, joint walks, twice a week. Travel expenses will be paid by the Duke. Aslan was surprised that the girl only added dates, not money. But he also added a new point. If she does not cure him completely, he can do what he sees fit. Lariat agreed. Although she was going to heal him completely anyway, when the clause was now written into the contract, she felt a little scared. They signed a contract. Lariat decided not to waste time and invited Aslan to a picnic in the garden tomorrow. The Duke replied that he would be busy tomorrow and would go to the Imperial Palace. Then she insisted on the day after tomorrow. The Duke asked why she was in such a hurry to go on a date with him, to which Lariat replied that she wanted to get his love as quickly as possible. She laughed and they continued dinner in a good mood. Lariat opened the windows wide and admired the beautiful garden from the palace. Her mana had already been fully restored and she was ready to begin healing. She thought she needed to hurry. The girl entered the office. Aslan was sitting there at his desk. He asked why she woke up so early. Lariat confused him that he was the sun that rose again. Aslan felt awkward. But remembering the contract, he invited Lariat to take a walk in the garden during the day, while it was still cold outside. Therefore, he asked her to go to his room, adding that he still had a lot of work to do. To which Lariat sat down on the table in front of him, and said that they could work on cleansing the curse. the Duke realized that her mana had completely recovered, and he immediately postponed all his affairs for later. Lariat took Azlakan's hand and suggested removing the bandages, because it would be more effective. After all, last time she treated him through bandages and spent a lot of precious mana. She added that the curse on the hands is not strong, so once will be enough. The magic will work for several days, just like last time, and then the curse will completely disappear. The Duke looked at his beautiful, absolutely healthy hand and couldn't believe it. He had been looking for a way to heal for more than 10 years, and did not even think that now he could cleanse himself so easily. Azlakan asked Lariat how she felt after the magic, to which Lariat replied that she felt good. She already understood the essence, and last time she spent a lot on healing. The girl quickly took advantage of the moment and invited the Duke to a picnic. She sat in front of him on the table and smiled sweetly. The Duke agreed, since they had completed the cleansing. Azlakan and Lariat went for a walk in the beautiful summer garden. The girl was amazed by the beauty of the garden. There were fountains, gazebos, and a large number of beautiful flowers. It was a little cold. Lariat was cold in her light dress. She was shaking. The girl told Azlakan about this, to which he replied that he warned her that it was cold outside in the mornings in the spring. The girl said it still made sense because they were on a date, and she added that if he gave her his coat, she would feel much warmer. Azlakan did not want to take off his coat. The Duke thought about it. On the one hand, if he takes off his coat, the smell of the curse will appear. On the other hand, Lariat, as a magician of purification and healing, cannot get sick. Lariat ran to the fountain. The splashes fell directly on her and it turned out to be a rainbow. The girl asked the Duke to sit next to her in the sun. He called her ardent. She replied that it was only with him. Azlakan didn't like the distance between them, and Lariat wanted him to sit closer to her. The girl began to worry that he didn't like her. Maybe he was hurt by a past lover. Although she did not have much experience in love, she understood that it was important to show it at least somehow. At this time, the Duke tried to move even further away from her and ended up in a flower garden. Lariat opened the picnic basket. It contained champagne and fruit, plates and glasses. Azlakan remembered all the advice of the butler Hallstein, but quickly threw them out of his head. Lariat asked Azlakan what kind of food he prefers. He replied that there was no such food. The girl was very surprised by this. If there is no favorite food, then where is the joy of his life? The girl shared that she likes salmon sandwiches. She doesn't like the smell of cucumbers, but she can eat them. She thought that he didn't like cucumbers either, but to him it was the smell of pure beauty. The guy thought that since she is a purification magician, her aroma is clean and fresh, and this smell dilutes the smell of his curse. He would like to ask if she smells him or just tolerates him. While Azlakan was eating a sandwich, Lariat admired him, looked at him, like people usually watch a movie in a cinema on a big screen. She liked his cute face and got an idea. The sorceress waved her hand and different flowers swirled in the air. They quickly intertwined into one wreath. The wreath landed on Azlakan's head. Lariat looked at him with loving eyes. The Duke was outraged that the girl was making fun of him, and he decided to throw the wreath off his head. Tears appeared in Lariat's eyes, and she rushed for the wreath. He flew straight into the fountain. She's behind him. Then Azlakan ran after her and they fell into the water together. When they were in the fountain, Lariat fell on top of the Duke. He held her by the waist, and he looked down at her. It was very romantic. The Duke asked why Lariat ran into the fountain, and he was worried that she might catch a cold, to which she replied that this was unlikely, because she had a strong immune system and never got sick. Azlakan took Lariat in his arms, saying that a walk was enough for today. The girl struggled and screamed that the date was too short. She called it an ineffective waste of time. The temperature on the thermometer was 38.5. The sorceress still fell ill. The Duke and his butler stood over her bed. They were very concerned about her condition. Lariat joked that they had the opportunity to see her with a cold for the first time in her life. Azlakan didn't like that she didn't take her health seriously. The Duke warned the girl that he needed to go to the imperial palace on business, so he invited a priest who would treat her. She agreed. This surprised Azlakan very much, because he thought that she would be capricious like a child and ask him to stay. But Lariat behaved more seriously than he expected. The girl really liked the Duke's care. This cheered her up a little, and Azlakan, leaving with the butler, thought about Lariat's unusual behavior. Sitting already in the carriage, Aslikan wondered how Lariette was able to leave the Duchy of Blanche. Her parents couldn't just let her go to another duchy. Everything happened so quickly that he didn't have time to ask her. When he left the yard, a white carriage was driving towards his black carriage. When they drew level, the Duke saw a man with long white hair in the carriage. He thought it was a priestess. Duke Aslikan caught himself thinking that it was good that the priest was a woman. Why was he so happy? And he even smiled. He was surprised that this made him so happy. Lariette was surprised when she saw the priest in her room. He was a long-haired blonde man. The priest said that he came from the temple. The girl was impressed by his appearance. Priest Doha asked Lariette what she was doing here. She thought, what's wrong with Aslikan's house? Doha realized that this was a rude question. He added that due to his bad character, he was being harassed in the temple. The priest said that a clear hierarchy has been established in the holy monastery, and he is the junior priest. Doha said that in the holy monastery it is a common thing when older priests can offend younger ones. After all, he was the youngest. He showed Lariette his scar on his forehead. Lariette realized that such on-site treatment was the responsibility of junior priests without money, and she thought that the senior priests could remove that scar on her beautiful face. When the priest finished the treatment, Lariette began to feel much better. Although Doha received money for her treatment, she decided to thank him and remove his scar on her forehead. She asked him to come closer to her. Lariette touched Doha's forehead with her palm and began healing. His face seemed grateful. But the mana consumption for Lariette turned out to be more than she thought. It was a little strange. When Lariette finished healing, Doha touched his forehead and felt the scar, which was not there. He was surprised, but immediately realized that in front of him was a magician of purification and healing. Doha invited Lariette to become his personal healing magician, and he promised not to deprive her of the reward. The girl thought that the younger priests did not have much money and should be poor. Lariette replied that she was busy, thinking to herself that the first priority was the treatment of Aslikan. Doha said that he would be waiting for her any time she was free. The girl agreed for later. The priest said that in gratitude for the fact that she might become his personal healing magician, he would continue to treat her for free. His hand almost touched her hand. They were sitting on her bed. This seemed like a good condition for the girl, and she agreed. Then Doha invited her to become close friends. It seemed like a good introduction for both of them. The girl liked the word friend. After all, she had no friends. She thought it would be nice to get a taste of what friendship was like before she died. And Doha leaned over her and said that he liked her very much. Lariette asked Doha to take care of her, and he asked her the same thing, for Lariette to take care of him. Thus began the friendship between the magician and the priest. Mutually beneficial cooperation. When the priest returned to the temple of Alteon, the door swung open in front of him and the younger priest greeted him as High Priest Michael Dohavelian. Mikhail's face was serious and stern. Another minor priest followed him. He reminded the high priest that problems would arise if the soon-to-be pope was constantly away on business. The younger priest also noticed the absence of a scar on Michael's forehead. Dohavelian replied that it was the healing mage who did it. The priest was very surprised that an ordinary wizard turned out to be so strong. The high priest was also very interested in how an ordinary healing magician could have more powers than he, the most powerful priest. This was what he was to find out soon. What kind of girl was in front of him? When the Duke's carriage drove up to the palace, Aslikan sat in the carriage and was wondering if he should go or not. I decided not to go, getting out of the carriage. The coachman thought that he was going to kill someone, and he was just wondering whether to go to a meeting with the magician. Somewhere he had this feeling that he had to go. He found himself constantly thinking about her. As soon as Aslikan approached the door, Lariette was behind the door. She was very happy to see him, and he thought that this was the first time someone had come out to greet him. The Duke asked how she was feeling. Lariette replied that the cold had already passed, since the priest had excellent abilities. The priest promised to come to her again in 2 days, heal her, and then she would fully recover. The Duke touched Lariette's forehead. She smiled and said that she was already feeling better. Aslikan thought that the girl had become relaxed again, which meant she was really feeling better. While going up the stairs, the Duke told the girl that it was not necessary to come out to greet him, because this was not in the contract. To which Lariette told him that she missed him. The girl asked if he was thinking about her today. Asla Khan replied that he had not thought at all. Lariat knew that this was not true. Of course he thought about her. But why doesn't he confess? Lariat asked the Duke what he was doing tomorrow. Asla Khan thought that she wanted to arrange a cleansing session. He replied that he would work with documents on the estate, and that a session could be arranged. But Lariat said that they would do the cleansing in 3 days, and suggested that they have a date tomorrow. The girl took out tickets to the theater for the performance, and waited with a smile for an answer. The Duke asked what kind of piece of paper was in her hands. Lariat was indignant at how difficult it was to get these tickets for the famous performance, and besides, tomorrow was its last show. The girl was surprised and upset when the Duke told her that he would not go, and he only thought about how all the people in the hall would look at him with disgust and shy away from his damned smell. Asla Khan thought that they should discuss how easily she takes his curse, so he asked the question if she really wasn't afraid of him. It was not for nothing that they called it a sign of war. His nickname was due to the fact that he took hundreds of lives with one wave of his hand, and that piercing someone with a sword was a common thing for him. Lariat replied that she was afraid of him, but not so much that she would run away. Suddenly the girl hit Duke in the face. Her hand was red from the blow, and he still stood there and just asked what she did now. He wouldn't allow this to happen to an enemy. Lariat replied that she dared to attack Duke Kandel himself. In addition, she constantly looks into his eyes, sometimes takes his hand and calls him by name, and he didn't kill her for it. The girl insisted that he stop locking himself at home. She was only interested in his true desire to go to the performance, whether he wanted to or not, and not whether he would succeed or not. Lariat asked him not to worry about other people and think about what he himself wants. She asked for an answer by tomorrow morning. If he doesn't go, she will go with another man. It was a sunny day. Lariat was glad that they were going on a date right now. When she got out of the carriage, Asla Khan gave her his hand. She started fooling around and he barely caught her. The number of people frightened the Duke. Lariat noticed that he was nervous. She suggested going straight into the theater, especially since their seats were in a box where there would be no one but them. The performance was about love. The girl was filled with emotions. She would love the performance and the main character. Asla Khan asked if she liked princes. She replied that she liked handsome men. Lariat asked Asla Khan to go to the carriage, and she would go to the restroom. Coming out of the restroom, Lariat thought maybe they would have dinner out, when suddenly a familiar voice called out to her. It was the Marquis of Segreve with some new girl. He said he was glad to see her, to which the girl was indignant and clearly explained that she did not want to see him ever again in her life. Then the Marquis snapped his fingers. 2 bandits in black gloves and masks grabbed the girl. Segreve said that he specially planned this meeting because he did not forgive her for that shame. He touched her face with his hand and said that he could forgive her past sins for her pretty face and take her as his mistress, because she was no longer even a noblewoman. But his unpleasant speech was interrupted by the Duke, who with his sword cut off the heads of the guys who were holding Lariat. And he was ready to deal with the Marquis, but he fell to his knees. Lariat was saved. Asla Khan told Lariat that he was waiting for her in the carriage, but she did not return for a long time and he came for her. And those who do not know their place will be defeated. The Duke asked if he had disappointed her. The girl was silent. The Marquis, sitting on his knees on the ground, began to shout to Asla Khan how dare he and whether he knew who he was. This made the Duke very angry, and only Lariat stopped him from killing the Marquis of Segreve. She asked him not to kill the Marquis, citing that it would cause problems for them, to which Asla Khan replied that the Emperor himself recognized his right to lynching, and he must solve the problem with words. Lariat asked Asla Khan to go into their carriage. Sitting in the carriage, the Duke thought that he just needed to let the Marquis live. He asked Lariat how she was. She couldn't catch her breath properly. The Duke was sad, because he had already frightened the magician with his cruelty, and now she could leave, breaking off their relationship. But the guy remembered that they had a contract, and she could not leave him of her own free will. His flow of thoughts was interrupted by Lariat's joyful message that he was very cool when he dealt with the bandits. Now he is much cooler for her than the main character of the play. This made Asla Khan very happy, but he didn't show it and only answered her with a calm, "I see." And Lariat thought to herself that he was not cruel, but it was better to think that it was self-defense. The next morning, Lariette and the priest were sitting on her bed. The priest said that after the treatment she became overexerted and weakened, and asked her to be careful so as not to get sick again. Lariette just laughed. But in fact, the girl caught a cold after yesterday's date. She decided to ask the priest whether it was possible to cure an incurable disease with sacred power. But he answered no. Doha then added that perhaps a person with such sacred power as His Holiness the Pope could cure such a disease. Lariette began to think about how to meet with Dad. Doha thought that the contour of her mana was confused. This happens due to the large amount of mana. There are cases when they die, but the girl's degree of confusion is not fatal. It is possible that the disease will remain chronic for life. He decided to heal her, since she is a useful magician and will remain in his debt. The treatment will not be easy, but it will not take much time. The priest asked permission to treat Lariette. She allowed it. He hugged her, holding her tightly to him. They touched their foreheads and the magic began. Having finished, he said that was all for today, but he would need to do this a few more times. Doha said that if she was grateful, she could grant one request. He showed his hand, which was covered in blood and abrasions. Lariette was shocked and asked where he got hurt like that. The priest did not answer. After all, in fact, he injured himself to test the magician's powers. The hand was healed, but the girl fell on the bed exhausted. She did not expect to spend so much mana on it. Lariette jumped up in surprise when Doha placed a huge gem on her chest. He lied about his family finding the mine. The girl was glad to receive such an award in one session. The magician said that as long as she was alive, she would serve him as her client. And she added that he should not even think about looking for someone to take her place. Doha thought that she was the one and would not think of running away from him. The next morning, Lariette walked around the castle looking for the Duke. The butler Halstein came to meet her. He told the girl to go straight to his room and wake him up herself. The girl liked that the butler helped her so much. If things went on like this, he would help her marry the Duke, and she didn't want to dream of anything more. The butler showed her the room. The first time Lariette was in Azlakan's chambers, it was very spacious and luxurious. He was sleeping in his bed. She came up and wished him good morning. The Duke was surprised that she was here. But then he remembered the butler who so wants to marry them. Lariette said that since they were already in the bedroom, she would perform a cleansing procedure for the upper half of the body. So he needed to undress. Azlakan undressed and asked whether it was necessary to remove the bandages. The magician said that you need to touch bare skin for the best effect. He undressed, and Lariette looked with pleasure at his muscular body. Lariette touched first to check. She said that the body scale was too big for one time, but she would try. She lay right on top of him. The Duke felt awkward from such closeness. The magician felt sick from the consumption of mana. She plopped down on his chest and admitted that she had treated the priest yesterday. But from now on, she will carefully distribute her forces. She asked if he was okay with her treating someone else. The Duke wondered if she behaved with the priest the same way as with him. Then I thought it was stupid because the priest was a woman. Lariette asked when he would meet her and fell asleep right on his lap. Several days passed after this, and Lariette spent so long looking for a meeting with Azlakan, but he never appeared. But she had a constant friend who gave her love advice. Lariette and Doha became close while Azlakan avoided Lariette. Doha suggested that Lariette make Azlakan jealous of her. She replied that she did not have such a man, to which he replied that she had him. During their conversations, Doha continued to treat Lariette, holding her closer to him. The girl was surprised that he was giving love advice and treating her at the same time. Closing her eyes, she imagined Azlakan suffering from jealousy towards her. It put her in a good mood. The girl thanked Doha for her help and prepared to seduce the Duke. It was already late at night when the Duke returned home. Lariette was waiting for him on the stairs. He was surprised and asked what she was doing here. She replied that she was waiting for him. It's hard to see such a busy face. Lariette reminded them that they should go for a walk twice a week. Azlakan couldn't answer. He didn't feel good when he was next to her. Nausea, pain in the stomach or heart. That's why he's been avoiding her all this time. He didn't want to feel even worse. Lariette invited him to take a walk in the garden tomorrow. She felt that she was the only one clinging to this relationship. But she remembered that before she died, she would not want to give up on the path to her goal. So she asked again if he would go with her. The girl thought that he might have some important business to attend to. Aslikan replied that she did not have to plan to eat and go out with him. Then Lariette said that she would go for a walk with her new priest friend, and flirtatiously adjusted the brooch on her chest. Lariette said that she would overlook this violation of contract, allowing him to work. She ran up the stairs, leaving him alone to contemplate the idea of her going with someone else. Lariette lay down on the bed over her diary. This notebook was given to her by her father, and to Rayon a sword with jewelry. There was a list of tasks that she must complete in these 3 months before the end of her life. She completed 3 out of 5 points immediately. She gave Anne a cake, started saving money, and broke off her engagement to the Marquis of Segrève with scandal. The 4th point was to meet a handsome guy for 3 months. The girl wanted to fulfill the 5th point. This was the journey to the west that Roan spoke of. During the trip to the west, his skin was so tanned, and the water, food, and air, and people were good. Lariette had never been on a trip before. She really wanted to do before her death what she could not do before. She wanted to collect as many happy memories as possible before her life ended. For the same reason, she wanted to meet a handsome guy for 3 months. She remembered the way he looked at her. It definitely meant something. But she was so lonely. She was still alone. In the Temple of Altion, when the high priest Michael Dohavelian was changing his robes, his assistant, the junior priest, noticed that he changed into the clothes of the minor priest too often. Junior priest Joshua wondered what a person with such divine power and status could lack. But he remembered about the girl and asked if he was going to see her again. Joshua warned Michael that the sorceress serves Duke Candle, and if his identity is revealed, it will be a real disgrace for the church. The assistant asked if they couldn't just bring Lariette to the Altion temple, who would refuse to serve the future pope. Mikhail replied that he was an ordinary person, and he left the temple. What did he know about Lariette? She is the eldest daughter of the Duke of Blanche, the fiancée of the Marquis of Segrève, whose actions have been very alarming lately. She has excellent healing abilities and a huge supply of mana. It is clear that she is a purification sorceress, since she is attached to Duke Candle, who longs to be cleansed of the curse. It is also clear that the Duke will not spare money on her, and she is in love with him. Sitting in the carriage, Mikhail was thinking about how to make her his personal healing magician. It will be necessary to flirt with her while her relationship with Candle is not yet deep enough. Moreover, he liked her. As soon as he arrived at the castle, the doors of his carriage swung open, and Lariette flew into the carriage. She asked if he had free time now so they could take a walk, eat, and shop. The girl added that the operation of jealousy begins. Doha was happy about this, because under the pretext of the operation and jealousy, he wanted to spend time with her and go on dates. And they went to the city together. But why did the layman's clothes suddenly catch fire and he was left in only his shorts with teddy bears? And the priest Doka and the magician Lariette, holding his hand, run away in a hurry from someone, in the direction where the fire is. Now let's figure out what happened 10 minutes before. Lariette and Doha left the cafe, having had their fill of desserts. They both turned out to have a sweet tooth. The girl joked that she had a separate stomach for desserts. Lariette asked Doha why he was doing on-site treatment, because he has a lot of money. He replied that he usually doesn't go, but that time someone forced him to. The elders usually force the younger ones. The girl said not to worry about him. She would take revenge on the elders for him. He thought it was funny because she has as much mana as he has sacred powers, and she has no idea how strong she is. Doha asked how she could take revenge for him, to which Lariette replied that she could set someone on fire or hang someone from a tree. Doha thanked her for the words with which she encouraged him. The priest realized that the girl also possessed elemental magic. This means that she will not receive any benefit from opposing the temple, and this is just empty talk. Suddenly, the girl saw a brooch with a large black stone in a store window. She immediately thought about Aslikan, but she told her friend that she liked the decoration for him and wanted to go and ask the store for its price. Lariette ran into the store, and Doka remained on the street. A priest of the highest rank passed by and touched the Doha with his shoulder. He wanted to make a scandal because Doha, dressed as a junior priest, did not apologize to the elder. He so wanted to tell who he really was, and besides, he could simply kill him with his gaze, burn him to the ground. But he didn't want to reveal his identity just yet, and there were a lot of people around here. So Doha overcame himself and apologized to the senior cleric. He was pleased and went on about his business. When suddenly that guy's entire clothes, down to his underpants, caught fire. Lariat ran up to Doha, grabbed his hand and called him to run with her away from this place. She admitted that she did it. She promised to take revenge on the senior ranks for him. The girl added that she would take upon herself all the problems from this situation. Doha laughed, calling Lariat entertaining. He wanted even more to get this magician for himself. He affectionately called her Ree. Duke Candle slammed his fist on the table when he heard that Lariat had been walking around the city with the priest all day. And it turned out that the priest was a man, not a woman, as he had previously thought because of his long hair. Butler Hallstein said they would have big problems if they left it like this. He asked the Duke to try to at least have dinner with the girl, since it was unknown how far their relationship would go. Asla Khan imagined Lariat and Doka kissing, and thought that this had nothing to do with him because she was just a magician who healed him, and her offer to date him is just temporary childishness. Various thoughts were spinning in Duke's head. On the one hand, this is just a girl who cleanses him, and on the other hand, something happened inside him when he saw her, and he would like to continue the relationship with her. The next day, Asla Khan invited Lariat to dinner together. Sitting at dinner, she asked why he invited her. Wasn't he busy? He replied that he had decided that they had not spoken for a long time. Lariat thought that the jealousy tactic had worked after all. Doha understands this like a walking encyclopedia of relationships. It seemed to her that Asla Khan's face was captivating. Such beauty can conquer the universe. Asla Khan asked Lariat how she was doing, to which she replied that it was good. He asked what she did yesterday, and she replied that she was walking with a friend, thinking to herself that after all, he was jealous if he was asking her like that. The girl said that her friend would come to her now. She added that he should not worry, because they would be in their own room, to which he replied that he did not worry about it. She asked if he was jealous. Asla Khan replied that he was not jealous, and the main thing was that it did not affect the purification process. Larry upsetly said, "I see," and said goodbye and left, adding that they would see each other at the procedure. When Doha was in Lariat's room, he asked what happened and why she was so sad. She replied that she had failed to make the Duke jealous. He sat down on her bed and began to calm her down. The priest thought to himself that the plan did not work, because such a monster as Candel was simply not capable of jealousy. All that remains is to try a little, and Lariat will be his personal magician of healing and purification. Lariat thought that it was rude to talk only about her all the time when he came, and she asked why Doha was wearing glasses today, adding that he looked like a librarian, but it suited him very well. Doha replied that he felt he needed to wear them today. In fact, Dohavelian used a prophecy. This is the ability of only outstanding believers and an important criterion to become pope. The priest asked if Lariat liked his look with glasses. She replied that he was handsome, and therefore anything suits him. And then he pulled her closer to him and suggested starting treatment. At this time, in Asla Khan's office, the butler indignantly assessed his behavior towards the girl at breakfast. But at the same time, he realized that she was very dear to him. Butler Hallstein realized that the Duke's feelings had plunged into chaos. It wasn't easy for him. He had been avoiding people since he was cursed. Perhaps it is simply difficult for him to understand your feelings. I really want him to be happy. The assistant said that it was important for him to understand what was in his soul. He said that the priest had already arrived, and they were in Lariat's room. Hallstein told him to go and see for himself, and understand how he felt about the girl. Asla Khan remembered how Lariat asked if he was jealous of her, and he thought that he was simply not capable of jealousy after the witch's curse, that he simply cannot love someone if there is emptiness in his heart. The Duke left his office and headed down the corridor past Lariat's room. Through the slightly open door, he saw the priest touching her face and pressing her to him. He thought they were kissing and ran into the room. An angry Asla Khan grabbed the priest's hand and demanded that he move away from the girl. The priest introduced himself. Lariat was shocked that two handsome men were fighting for her. Doha was glad that he wore glasses today, and therefore no one would reveal his identity. He hugged the girl and reassured her, calling her Ree. Lariat said that he was just treating her in a friendly way. Asla Khan did not like how he affectionately called her Rie, and in general their treatment position did not suit him, so he asked the priest to leave the room. It seemed to Doha that Candel was not at all as heartless as everyone might have thought. Lariette and Aslan sat together on the bed in complete silence. The girl broke the silence and asked why he behaved this way. Because he told her that he was not jealous of her. Aslan remembered how he flew into the room and scared the girl. The Duke thought that he had behaved too emotionally. Was he really jealous? Then he remembered the butler's words that he must understand what he feels, what he himself wants, without thinking about other people. And he admitted to Lariette that he remembers their time together. And as soon as he thinks that she belongs to another, he begins to boil. He doesn't want to hurt her or have her hate him for his behavior. Aslan admitted that he would like her to be his. He pushed the thought away and ignored his feelings. But Lariette asked if she could go out for drinks with Doha. Aslan was against it and asked her not to go. The Duke confessed his feelings to Lariette. He said that it was the first time he felt his heart beating so fast. As soon as someone touches it, he wants to cut off his hand. And if this is jealousy, then yes, he is jealous of her. She is in his thoughts all the time and he wants to see her. This feeling was unfamiliar to him before, which is why he doubted it for so long. But now he's ready. Aslan asked Lariette if her offer to date was still valid. He added that he really liked her. Of course, Lariette agreed. They drowned in each other's arms. Lariette asked Aslan to take care of her from now on, and he asked her to take care of him in return. They were happy. This happened for the first time. A situation in which the Duke gave love and received it in return. Lariette thought about the next 3 months with him before her death. Aslan thought about making the garden beautiful for Lariette, in case she would be with him all her life.